Hello and welcome to Simcha, a celebration of life. I'm your host, Aaron Halevi. In today's show, Sara Evian explores the Jewish month of Nissan. We paid tribute to the Hebrew Order of David as part of 175 years of the South African Jewish community, and look at the connection between Judaism and the environment. The Jewish month of Nissan is often referred to as the month of spring, and it is in this month that the Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt. During the month of Nissan, we celebrate the festival of Pesach, or Passover, and the miracles that happened which allowed their exodus from Egypt.
We're now in the month of Nissan, which we learn is the first month of the year, because it is a month that we, the Jewish people, were freed from Egypt. And so the whole month is about being liberated from anything that constrains us. The word Egypt, Mitzrayim, actually comes from the word Meitzar, which means a constriction or a limitation. And when the sages say that we should remember being freed from Egypt every day of our lives, it doesn't only mean that we were freed from physical Egypt. It means that every day of our lives we should be working towards freeing ourselves from our own constrictions and limitations. And it's amazing to think that today we need to look at who our pharaohs are. Then it was the Egyptian king who beat us with whips and made us do the most horrendous things, and we were tortured. But today, actually, we are enslaved not only by our society and our more closer environment, but we tend to enslave ourselves. And it's very interesting to note that the word for burdens that the Torah uses with the Jewish people in Egypt, the burdens that they carried, is the word sivlois. This word comes from the word savlanet, patience in Hebrew. And really what it means is what we tolerate in our lives. We tolerate so many things that are self-inflicted. And a lot of our freedom comes from being aware of what we are tolerating within ourselves and also within our environment and with others. And so this month of freedom, it's really about looking at our pharaohs and our constrictions and everything that binds us and makes us not be able to be free. Because essentially, when we left Egypt, we became free people. And because of that, we are always able to be free. So the month is created through the letter Hey, which is actually the first sound that we have. It's a H. It's not a hard sound. It's the first sound of breath coming through our larynx and our mouth. And that is the first sound of speech that we have. And the sense of the month is that of speech. So the world is created through speech, and we know that speech is one of our most essential faculties. That's why it's the sense that through which healing happens in the first month of the year. And the word Pesach that we celebrate on the full moon of Nissan, when the light is shining at its greatest, the most powerful energy of the month, Pesach means by the mouth. And the whole story of Pesach, the whole Haggadah, is about telling the story of us leaving Egypt. It really is about narrative therapy. That's where narrative therapy comes from. The ability to talk about our problems and our issues and our life, and through that to heal through it. So when we're sitting on Pesach night on the full moon, that's what we are doing collectively as a people. We are engaging in this amazing closeness of narrative therapy of our whole cultural history with our closest friends and family. We learn that the greatest exile a person can be in is that of speech. And a human being is called a medaber, a speaker. That is the label that Kabbalah gives a human being. It is a speaker. It's our essential point of connection with one another. To be able to really share our inner ideas and our aspirations and our insights, that is a great place of connection. Pesach occurs in the month of spring in Israel. It's just been winter, everything's been deadened, and from Nissan, everything begins to blossom again. The trees, the flowers, and all the fruit starts to grow. And so we learn from this that freedom is likened to a blossoming and a flourishing. Everything is beginning to come to life again. And it is through this spring-like activity that we can gain a lot of our insight on how to heal, of being fresh, refreshened with the energy, and going in, fixing or rectifying our speech and connecting to the hay, the breath of our life that flows through us. Hay has the numerical value of 5, like our hand, but it really means to return to the 5th dimension, the dimension when we have really left all our constraints and feel one with ourselves and with God. So I bless us this month, we're able to reach that amazing pinnacle of freeing ourselves, learning who our pharaohs are, cleaning our houses and ourselves up, looking for the chomets that we do, and in doing so, ridding ourselves of what we tolerate and of what's not healthy for us anymore.
Welcome back. Continuing with our celebration of 175 years of Jewish life in South Africa, we pay tribute to the Hebrew Order of David. Originally established in England, worthy brother Joseph Distiller moved to South Africa at the end of the war in 1904 and formed the first branch in Johannesburg. The aim of the organization was to provide a support system for newly immigrant Jews who had arrived from Eastern Europe.
To welcome all the visitors from out of town. We've traveled all the way from the United States to be here. Thank you for making the effort and coming here, and it's really been a pleasure hosting you and having you here.
The HOD started off after the Anglo-Boer War because there was immigration to South Africa mostly from Eastern Europe. They came here, males only. They left their families behind. So the two gentlemen, Mr. Fager and Mr. Distiller, they came to South Africa. They realized the need. They had been involved in this type of work overseas, in this type of activity overseas in England, and they came here and they realized that these people coming here needed help. They had basically nothing. They came with nothing. They had nothing, and they ended up helping themselves. So the HOD was formed as an organization to help themselves. So it had medical aspect. If you're sick, you got access to a doctor. They had a panel of doctors. If you needed work, they'd try and find you a job. They gave you a little bit of money. Every Monday night you would meet, or whatever day of the week it was for your lodge. You'd meet and you'd get some food, you get a hot meal, and they would find accommodation for you. So they generally helped people pull themselves up by the bootstraps. Everybody was in the same boat, some had a little bit more than others, and they pulled themselves up.
It started as the Hebrew Order of Druids, and it became the Hebrew Order of David very early in the 1900s, and it grew in South Africa. At one stage there must have been 45 lodges, and with immigration, etc., South African lodges have decreased substantially, and there are now only 8 lodges left in South Africa.
I think the first lodges that were established outside of South Africa were established in London, and that was by the late Asher Tepper, and he convinced Les Kreutzig to start it in the United States. So I would say, why? I think it's because we knew HOD, we all enjoyed the comradeship, the chavashaf, the things that HOD did, and we felt it would suit us to start one there. Now, we started off with only South Africans, but today in America, we have over 500 members throughout, in 8 lodges, and most of those 500 members are not South African, they're American. So we've educated the Americans into this way of life, and of course the Americans understand fraternity because this is where they have it in their universities, and really our growth today is because of the American contingency that we have.
It was formed in South Africa because you had all the immigrants coming from Eastern Europe, and they needed some kind of a body to identify with, and they built up this support system, and that's how it all started. And then it became the charity and the community work, and the lodges started to form wherever there were Jewish people, there was a lodge.
Fortunately, we do have some Jewish people of eminence, of wealth throughout the world. But believe me, there are many Jews throughout America, and I'm sure in South Africa and other countries, that do need help. We run a fund in Atlanta, the Rosh Hashanah Fund. Now we distribute the monies that we collect through an organization in Atlanta called Jewish Family and Career Services. And there's in Atlanta alone, there's about, over 200 families that they support over that period. So although, as I say, there are wealthy families, and thank God, most of the Jewish families are comfortable to various extents, there unfortunately are some that do need help.
In Israel, there's a huge amount of activity going on all the time, especially where it comes to raising funds for the poor, for the sick, for soldiers that have been injured. It's extremely difficult to collect money in Israel for the simple reason that 5,000 other people are doing it as well. And in fact, my appeal at this conference was that we want to do a raffle of a silver menorah, and we're asking the lodges overseas please to buy tickets, because to sell in Israel is impossible, because hardly a week goes by that you don't have 2 or 3 people coming to your home and asking for money, or coming to the Beit Knesset, to the shul, asking for money. And that's like virtually 3 times a week we have people coming. And we need to do more. Of course, having attended this convocation, I'm more enthused to do a lot more when I get back, because one does get despondent.
We do good work under the auspice of the Hebrew Order of David. So I think it's important that we continue that under the umbrella of the Hebrew Order of David. Why is it important? I think it's important because we have the values are important, the values that we have, and our members, they all feel very strongly that the Hebrew Order of David and what we do is important for the Jewish community. Although not all our, most of our fundraising and work is done through the community, for the Jewish community, both in America and in Israel, and in some cases South Africa. We've just done a very big fundraiser for the Selwyn Siegel home that's going to benefit them very, very well, tremendously over the next 2 years.
Members of the Hebrew Order of David who over the years have occupied very high offices. They've been mayors of towns, they've been members of parliament, they've cut their teeth in meetings and they've learned how to conduct themselves, and they've grown out of it. And so it's been really a training ground for young brethren to grow into business if they want to learn a little bit about speaking in public, because the meetings are held in that sort of format. And it allows them to grow and to express themselves and to understand what it is to be involved in communal affairs. All those type of things, I think, mean a lot to young people coming up, and it gives them confidence. So it's a start-off point for young people to really get involved and to meet other people. It's a network it's a live network. This is not Facebook. This is not LinkedIn. This is real. This is people meeting people. That's what happened this weekend. And I can assure you that this weekend there were many friends made, and associations and initiatives will come out of this weekend, other than what we discussed behind 4 walls.
I was approached by my late father, worthy brother Asher Tepper, back in 2004, and asked if I would form a young lodge. within the UK. There were already 3 lodges that were in existence, but they wanted a younger lodge to make sure that they could continue the work going forward into the future. In those days, I was in my 20s, my late 20s, and I got together with probably 20, 30 guys of similar age to me, and we formed Lodge under number 4. It was a really difficult process to begin with, primarily because we had certain ideas and certain ways in which we wanted to go, and yet the older lodges wanted to keep us almost in check. We carried on and we pushed on through and were able to make some really good changes within the UK. And we started to approach others in our community, and we have found that there's definitely a need, and there are definitely people who want to be a member of this organization.
Going forward, I believe we need to concentrate heavily on Israel. The Israel lodges are aging. They're having difficulty attracting Israelis to the lodges, so it's mostly ex-South Africans. We need to concentrate on South Africa, where this was the center of the HOD. We need to concentrate on getting them to form a new lodge. America will form new lodges. America, it's easy. United Kingdom, we're talking about forming another lodge in the United Kingdom. We probably will form a young lodge, because that's the future. The future's not me. I'm not the future of the HOD. I've done what I've done. It's now the 40-year-olds, the 35-year-olds that need to carry it forward.
People who join this organization join and they never leave because they want to be involved in the process. Yes, there are people who do leave, but there's going to be other reasons. But if you want to be with your own kind and you want to really work together to raise money and to do good, this is the philosophy of the HOD, to build up that side of your life and give something back.
The Jewish approach to nature is based on the belief that the entire universe is the work of the Creator. Love of God includes love of all His creations, the inanimate, plants, animals, and humans. Nature in all its beauty is created for us, and our connection to nature restores us to our original state of peace and happiness. In our new series, Judaism and Ecology, Ilana Steyn explores the connection between Judaism and environmentalism.
In the 1970s, a naturalist whose name is Charles Lynn White wrote a book in which he was discussing the ecological disasters of the world. And he pretty much blamed the Judeo-Christian tradition for the mess that the world was in. And he referred, of course, to Genesis, saying that Genesis is the problem because God allowed the people, human beings, to do everything that they wanted to do with the world, and oh my gosh, look at the terrible mess that the world is in. And I would say that, and I think any religious environmentalist of any religion would say that he's incorrect. He had the first point, but he needed to go a little further. Because what he was referencing is the famous verse that everyone knows, that right in the beginning of Genesis, we have the account of the creation of the world. And in that, on the 6th day, the human being is created, and God says to them, He blesses them, and He says, be fruitful and multiply, fill the world and conquer it. And that does sound like carte blanche to do whatever we like in the world. But what he forgot was that, firstly, the next verse straight after that, in fact, has God saying, you may eat of all the trees and the grasses of the world, but that's all. In other words, for human beings and animals, already there's a limiting of what they can do in the world. And at that point, it meant that everyone was vegetarian. How that exactly works biologically, we won't go into. But immediately we see that there is a limit placed on what human beings can do. That goes further in chapter 2 of Genesis, verse 15, which is a very famous one, and it's a favorite one of all religious environmentalists. And that goes to say that, that says that God placed the human being in the Garden of Eden, le'ovda u'leshomra, to work it and to guard it. So within the first 2 chapters of Genesis, which relate to the creation of the world and to the beginnings of a relationship between God, the world, and the human being, we see that while we are allowed to do all sorts of things and to develop this world, to use technology, to enjoy the world, really, that's really what Genesis 1 is telling us. We already see that in Genesis 2, God is telling us that we need to work the world, meaning we can gain things from it as we work it. We grow crops, we create maybe new crops, etc. But at the same time, leshomra, to God, is a word that implies something precious. That the world is precious and you need to watch over it. You really need to make sure that it's something that is not necessarily always going to be there. What I find fascinating, and when I was searching for how Judaism viewed the world as someone who's a conservationist and environmentalist, I knew about these verses, for example, and also, of course, the fact that in our book of laws, the first two chapters deal with the world around us, tells us that, in fact, that's something that we're supposed to make important. That God didn't just place us here in order to run the world and keep his laws, but in fact, we need to appreciate the world. And we need to enjoy it, but we need to know that there are limits to what we can do. So fascinatingly, there is an ancient midrash written over 2,000 years ago. A midrash is a rabbinical commentary, in this case on the book of Ecclesiastes, that is looking at a verse of Ecclesiastes and tells a story about it. And it goes as follows. Look at the work of God, for who can rectify that which he has damaged? Which is a very obscure verse. It's Ecclesiastes 7:13. And the midrash says as follows. It says, at the time when God created Adam, he took him around the trees of the Garden of Eden, and he said to him, look at my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are. Everything that I created for you. Take care that you do not damage or destroy my world, for if you damage it, there is no one to repair it afterwards. Now, when I read that, that blew my mind, because 2,000 years ago, before Greenpeace and before Al Gore and before all the things that make up our awareness of the green world that we have today, there were people saying, in the name of God, understanding that when God places the human being in the Garden of Eden, and when he says to work it and to guard it, he is saying, you have to look after the world. And if you don't, I'm not coming after you with a broom to clean it up. I'm not going to come and fix it. So if you ruin it, you have to fix it up. And I think we're living in that kind of world today, where that sense of accountability is something that is hopefully slowly growing. What I like about this verse, though, of course, is to see how it is, in fact, way back when, implanted right there within our religious texts, which means that certainly in those days, they totally understood the responsibilities that a human being has on this earth.
Well, that's all we have for this week's episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. As always, we'd love to hear from you, so please send us a message on Facebook at Spirit Sister Productions. From me, Aaron Halevi, and the Simcha team, have a wonderful week ahead.